Hello and welcome to Bible study time. Well, we got through the seven churches of Revelation, and I certainly hope that you gleaned something from those churches. Because guess what? We're going to come back around to them, look at them at a different way. But this time, our series is a great one. It's a great one. I'm telling you, it's great. And it's the series is I have learned the F word. Whoop! Now get your man up out of the gutter, cause it is not what you think it is. Our lesson for today: how do I forgive? How do I forgive? Ooh, see, forgiveness is not something that comes easy. See, many times we get hurt in this life, but it's not how you got hurt, but how you reacted to the hurt. So, after studying this lesson, this series, students should realize that forgiveness is for us. It's not for the other person, it's for us. Also, we need to learn how to give forgiveness and move beyond the hurt. Now, that's saying a lot. I know it is. But this applies to not only the hurt others inflict on us, but the hurt we inflict on ourselves. Now, have you ever really shown enough been hurt by another person? Almost everyone has. And it's extremely difficult to forgive those who really hurt us. Uh, a little funny incident, illustration. A mother was washing the dishes, and her two children were in the other part of the house playing in their next room. And to her great surprise and fear, she heard her son cry out in pain. He's about 5 years old, and he was crying out in pain, so she rushed into the room to see what was going on. What did she find? She found the 18-month-old daughter was pulling his hair. So she gently loosened the young baby's grip and freed her son, and she soothed him with hugs and kisses and saying, there now. She didn't know she was hurting you. Well, the little boy acknowledged the explanation, and so when everything calmed down, the mother left the room again, only to hear the little girl crying. So back she rushes into the room, and she said, "What happened?" Her 5-year-old son said, "Well, you said that she didn't know she was hurting me when she pulled my hair." He looked at his mother and said, "Well, she knows now, because he got her back." Well, it's comical. But see, many of us like the idea of getting even. I mean, we cheer when the villain finally gets their payback. But as a Christian, we must learn how to forgive. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm one of those ones that look at a movie and I can get so caught up, and then, hey, when it comes payback time for the villain, oh, yeah, you ought to hear me cheer. See, but as a Christian, we have to learn to forgive. And forgiving is the heart and foundation of the Christian faith. You make a living by what you get. You make a life by what you give. Now, this lesson talks about giving, but it's not about giving money. Uh, One of the many things that people need to give to be whole is forgiveness. Now, forgiveness is something that money cannot buy. No, 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 no. Isn't it interesting that the word give is in the word forgiving? So this lesson is about giving, but it's about forgiving, giving forgiveness. Now I'm going to ask you right off and right early. What is your definition of forgiveness? What is your definition of forgiveness? Well, let me tell you, remember I said I love to cheer when the villain gets their payback? Well, let me say this. Forgiveness is giving up your right to get even. Woo! That was nasty. Forgiveness is giving up. Remember we said the word give is in forgiveness? Then what you are doing when you forgive is giving up your right to get even. Think about that. Because sooner or later, somebody in the world, and you're living in this world, is going to hurt you and hurt you real bad. Perhaps it has already happened. And perhaps it has not. But let me tell you, it's going to happen. There are no exemptions. There are no get out of jail free cards. There is no pass card. And just because you are a Christian, listen to me now. Just because you are a Christian and you feel like I'm a good person, that doesn't exempt you from being hurt. I mean, read the Bible. Some of the best Christians got hurt. Noah got hurt by his constituents. What does that tell you? People will hurt you. Abraham got hurt by Lot. What does that tell you? Family will hurt you. Esau got hurt by Jacob. What does that tell us? That your brother will hurt you. David got hurt by Saul. And so that tells us what? Friends will hurt you. And then look, if that wasn't enough, Noah, Abraham, Jacob, Esau, David, Saul, all of them, Jesus was hurt by Peter, Judas, and all the disciples. So what does that tell us? Those who you trust will hurt you. Those you rely on will leave you when you need them the most. I know many a person have said I don't care what you think about me. But yes, you do. Yeah, you do. You think about it. And while I'm on it, let me say this. There is no hurt like a church hurt. We in the church, we can suffer some tremendous hurt. Now, because people can be cruel. And yet we are to forgive those people. Let me just put it this way. Some of the strongest words directed toward us comes from Jesus, and they are about offenses we have not forgiven. One day Peter came to Jesus and said, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Now see, the rabbis taught that a brother should be forgiven for a repeated sin 3 times. On the 4th time, all bets are off. I'm not forgiving you this time, so don't ask me. So Peter, trying to up the game and want to appear generous, says, so what, 7 times? He was thinking like the scribes and the Pharisees and us. We want to keep score. Now, I've forgiven you. How many times have I forgiven you there? I done forgive you 3 times now. Come on. We don't necessarily think in terms of forgiveness as something that is unlimited. So, but then, read Matthew 18, 21 and 22. Then Peter came to him and said, Lord, how many times could my brother sin against me and I forgive him? As many as 7 times? Look what 22 says. That's just Jesus' reply. I tell you, not as many as 7, Jesus says to him, but 70 times 7. Say, what, Jesus? But you don't understand. 70 times 7? And some versions of the Bible say 77, and others say 70 times 7. I mean, why the difference? Well, because the Greek text could be translated either way. In either case, this is what Jesus was saying. Give me now, listen to me now. He's saying that forgiveness should be unlimited. So you forgave me yesterday. That was yesterday. Forgive me today. And Peter was thinking in terms of the law, but Jesus answered with the law of Christian love. So, how does 1 Corinthians 13 and 5 describe the behavior of Christian love? Here's what it said. Love is not ill-mannered or selfish or irritable. Love does not keep a record of wrongs. Woo! Whose idea was it to do this lesson? Whoa! Because I'm telling you, that puts it there now. Love is not ill-mannered or selfish or irritable. Love will not say, you are getting on my last nerve. That's irritable. And love doesn't keep a record of wrongs. So what is your definition of forgiveness? Think about it. Peter has asked if 7 times forgiving a person is good enough. But if we keep score, we're not really forgiving anybody. So in response to Peter, Jesus tells the parable that reveals the secret of forgiveness. Let's look at Matthew 18, 23 through 35. For this reason, the kingdom of heaven can be compared to a king who wanted to settle accounts with his slaves. Let me stop right there and say this. A day of accountability is coming. We have got to give an account. So you mistreat somebody today, are you aggravated? Are you angry with them without cause? Or perhaps you feel that you got a cause? There is a day of accountability coming. Now, verse 24, when he began to settle accounts, one who owed 10,000 talents was brought before him. Since he had no way to pay it back, his master commanded that he, his wife, his children, I don't know how many children he had, but every one of them, and everything he had to be sold to pay the debt. At this, the slave fell face down before him and said, "Be patient with me, and I will pay you everything." Dude, do you realize how much you owe? He said, "I'll pay you everything." Then the master of the slave had compassion, released him, and forgave him the loan. But that slave went out and found one of his fellow slaves who owed him 100 denarii. He grabbed him, started choking him, and said, "Pay me what you owe, you rascal, you." At this, his fellow slave fell down and began begging him, "Be patient with me. I will pay you back." It's almost the same thing that he said to the king. But now look at verse 30, but he wasn't willing. On the contrary, he went and threw him into prison until he could pay what was owed. He was in his right. He had the right to do that. Now, look at verse 31. When the other slaves saw what had taken place, they were deeply distressed and went and reported to their master everything that had happened. Then, after he had summoned him, his master said to him, "You wicked slave, I forgave you all that debt because you begged me. Shouldn't you have also had mercy on your fellow slave as I had mercy on you?" Woo! And his master got angry and handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he could pay everything that was owed. Well, now this man owed too much and he couldn't pay everything, so he just gonna get tortured. So my heavenly Father will also do to you if each of you do not forgive his brother from his heart. That's the word of God. Now, let's talk about this. Let's just break it down and see. Let's talk about grace and mercy shown. Woo! You've heard that song, haven't you? Your grace and mercy. Well, we're going to see about grace and mercy. Let's look at the first servant. The king desired to settle accounts with his servants. That means to collect from them what they owed him. They owed him. And the servant could be sold into slavery if he did not have enough money to settle the debt. Even his family could be sold into slavery. And my sisters and brothers, this is what could be done. He would have been in his right. Look at Leviticus 25:39. And if one of your brethren who dwells by you becomes poor and sells himself to you, here's what you are to do. Your brethren who dwells by you becomes poor and sells himself to you, say, look, I will work for you. You shall not compel him to serve as a slave. Pay him. Now, look at 2 Kings 4:1. A certain widow of the wives of the prophets, her husband had died. So your servant feared the Lord. And she's talking to the prophet. She said, your servant feared the Lord, and the creditor is coming to take my 2 sons to be his slave. And I'm telling you, in Israel, these slaves, people could do that. The creditor could do that. But here's the difference. In the year of Jubilee, in accordance with the Mosaic law, you had to free them. You had to set them free. You could say, well, the debt wasn't paid. Well, the debt was paid because you are to set them free. So this servant fell on his knees before him, displaying humility and desperation. Now, when the king had said, look, I need you to give an account for all that you owe me, he could not pay. So he fell on his knees before him, pleading, displaying humility and desperation. And how do I know he was desperate? Because he said he would pay back everything he owed. Well, if you could be paying back, you would have been paying back before the day of reckoning. See, he owed an astronomical amount. No free laborer, let alone a slave, could ever hope to repay this amount in 1,000 lifetimes. Woo! He owed big money. But the servant pleaded for patience and promised to pay back everything he owns. I mean, this is like a factory worker today pledging to pay off the national debt of the United States by himself. Ain't no way an average factory worker could do that. Number one, Republicans are not going to let you, because then they got nothing to holler about. Number two, well, let's go on. Anyway, but now I want to stop right here and say this. This parable is not about justification and salvation. It's important to keep in mind that we're not dealing with forensic forgiveness. This is not about the law, about justification and salvation, because I told you the law said that they could be sold into slavery if you couldn't pay. But it's about family forgiveness. Woo! This make it a little deeper, see? See, because you know it's not about justification or salvation, because none of us could do that. But it's about family forgiveness. Somebody in your family has wronged you, or somebody in the family of mankind in the church. Remember I said at the top of the lesson, there's no hurt like a church hurt. Perhaps somebody in the church has hurt you. Well, this is about family forgiveness. This deals with sins committed since entering into the family of the King. into the family of God. The issue is brother to brother forgiveness. Do you hear me? It's not about you forgiving and somebody's going to receive salvation. It's about you showing forgiveness to your brother. So the servant's master, the king, felt his heart going out to this man. He took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. The servant, now get this, the servant was undeserving. He didn't deserve that. What had he done? He hadn't paid back. But the king acted with mercy. I said we're going to show grace and mercy. The king acted with mercy, in other words, withholding punishment that he deserved. He couldn't pay. He received the money. He deserved to go to jail. But mercy was shown him, because the punishment that he deserved was withheld, and grace was given. And grace is a gift given that was not deserved. See, punishment was deserved, but that was withheld. That's mercy. Grace is giving a gift that was not deserved. And so this man got grace and mercy showed him, and it was not deserved. Well, let's look at the second servant. But the first thing that should catch your attention, because we were reading, we were reading. Yeah, here it is. At this time, I'm at verse 26. At this time, the slave fell face down before him and said, "Be patient with me, and I will pay you everything. I will pay you everything that I owe." Then the master of that slave had compassion, released him, and forgave him the loan. Did you hear what I said? Then the master of that slave had compassion, released him, and forgave him of the loan. Now, but when you come to verse 28, there's a word that signals something is getting ready to go wrong. But, there it is, but that slave went out and found one of his fellow slaves who owed him 100. Now, he owed 10,000 talents. In other words, he owed the king millions of dollars. But he was owed hundreds of dollars. So, the amount the second slave owed the first was insignificant when you compared it to what the first slave owed the king. It's mind-boggling. See, these two were alike. They each owe a debt. And the creditor had the power over the debtor's life. But in every respect, the situation was different. And this highlights the contrast between the first and the second slave. Now, this first slave had not understood family principles. But he's about to learn. He's about to learn. Now, the amount, listen to me now. The amount the second servant owed the first one was insignificant when compared to what the first one owed the king. All right, so it was significant. But rather than imitating the king, the first servant mistreats the second servant. And not only mistreat him, but begin to choke him and demand repayment of the debt. Now I'm going to say again, the second servant's debt was not insignificant, what he owed that first man. I mean, it makes you wonder, how could you loan the second so much when you was borrowing from the king yourself? But that's neither here nor there, because that's the way people do. Now, it would take some time for the second servant to pay the first servant, but it could be done. It was doable. But now the first servant, he said he was going to pay back everything. But there was just ain't no way he could pay it back. And so, here's what. When a brother offends us, it is logical. That's the word I wanted to use. It is logical to think that we are entitled to just recompense. There is legitimate restitution. But what we forget when we fail to release a brother from an offense by forgiving him is that relationships in the family of God go beyond strict justice. Woo! And God himself started this pattern by forgiving us a debt that we could never hope to repay. And so because he forgave us a debt we could never hope to repay, this should give us good reason to show the same that we have received. You see, because essentially Jesus redeemed us, and redeemed means bought us back. He bought us back our life because we had sold our lives for nothing. And he redeemed us. That's why we say, I am redeemed, bought with the price. Jesus redeemed us. So we should live as he said. Or perhaps, let me put it this way. We should live as he lives. Now, which comes to why we should show grace and mercy. Why? Because we have been forgiven far more than we can ever forgive. See, we have a sin debt we cannot possibly repay. But, here comes a but. But when we ask God's forgiveness, David described it in Psalms 51:1. He says why God forgives us. Because of your constant love, because of your great mercy, wipe away my sins. That's what David said in Psalms 51:1. So we forgiven because of God's unfailing love. The Bible teaches us that God is love. And God does not fail, so his love won't fail. John said, behold, what manner of love is this, that we should be called the children of God. So, just like the mother at the first, in the little illustration told at the top of the lesson, she didn't know she was hurting you. Of course, the little boy got his revenge, but that's what we have to forego revengeance. Cause God said, vengeance is mine, I will repay. That's the word of God. I will repay. And forgiveness is giving up your right to repay. And God has forgiven us because of his great compassion. And any time and every time that you see the word compassion, you see God does something. Now, another reason. If I don't forgive, this is a biggie. This is a biggie. If I don't forgive, God will not forgive me. Phew. I don't know about you, but this lesson is wearing me out. When we don't forgive, we are showing a lack of appreciation for God's unfailing love and forgiveness. Now, I don't know about you. It's kind of like, let's say you're in prison and you receive a pardon. But if you don't accept the pardon, you stay in prison. And if I don't forgive as God has forgiven me, then all I did is just say, I'm going to stay in prison. Because I'm the one who's getting hurt by not showing forgiveness. Because if I don't forgive, God will not forgive me. The first time I go and say, oh, Lord, forgive me, he said, why didn't you forgive so-and-so? And the Bible repeatedly warns us of the penalty for failing to forgive. Matthew 5:7, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. You want mercy? You give mercy. And then, see, Jesus just don't say a few things. He gets to the heart of the matter. Jesus said we must forgive from our heart. This means that we just don't say, well, I forgive you. And then we act like we've forgiven. It means forgive them. Let them out of the prison of our heart. Oh, I know some people, they say, well, I'm going to forgive, but I won't forget. Well, if you truly forgive, then you may not forget it, but it won't be the core of your life. Every time you see that person, you think about it again, what they did to you. If you let them out of the prison of your heart, you're not going to say, I'm going to forgive you, but I won't forget it. Nobody said you got to, or let's say, okay, let's use this for an illustration. You got a friend, and your friend come over to your house and you sit and drink coffee, have tea, or whatever, have them for dinner, and then you find out that your friend been making out with your husband. Now, girlfriend, that now you really crossed the line. But if you forgive, let them out. You give up your right for revenge. But I'm not saying she got to come back over to your house. I'm not saying that. I'm saying forgive her and then go on and live your life. Now, if you let her come back, that's fine. No forgiveness, no Christianity. See, because forgiveness is the core and the essence of Christianity. And if you can't forgive, then there is no Christianity. You know, we saw in those churches in Revelation how they was just, they fed them to the lions and they cut them up and they did a little bit of everything. And those people forgave them. And as a recipient of God's forgiveness, we are debtors who must offer it to give to others. Matthew 6:12 say, forgive us our debts as we also forgive our debtors. And if you walk with God, it's not what it used to be. If your walk with God, now listen to me, if your walk with God is not what it used to be, is it possible that you are doing jail time until you forgive someone? See, in other words, if you don't forgive, you put yourself in jail. For if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive men their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive you. Now, I want you to read that again, meditate on it, think about it, and then in your lesson, you've got some questions. Now, we've been giving you homework, so this is nothing different. You have got a set of statements that perhaps might reflect your feeling. I have forgiven everyone, so this don't apply to me, or all that other stuff. But, and how do I need to forgive? How do I know I need to forgive? How do I begin the process of forgiving? That is what you need to take a look at, go through, and determine if you need to learn how to forgive. And let me close by saying this. To be forgiven, go to Calvary. To learn forgiveness, stay at Calvary. That's our lesson for today. Next week, we will talk about the F word of faith. We're going to talk about the stages of faith. And it's another great lesson. But let me say, for those who are listening, Jesus is waiting to forgive us of our many sins. And if you want to get a new start, then you ask him. You pray the sinner's prayer, Lord, I am sorry. I have done wrong and I ask for your forgiveness. Then email us at newstart@ssclive.org and tell us that you want to become a part of the fellowship. Or you can call 502-583-6798 and leave a message and someone will contact you. Or you can call me, or you can email me, gnelson@ssclive.org, and someone will get in touch with you. So join in with us again next week when we will talk about the 4 stages of faith. But today's lesson, don't forget, how do I forgive? Go back and take a look and do your homework. Well, that's our lesson for today. It was a little rough. But now, not only do you forgive others, but forgive yourself. See you next week. Be blessed.